After having scaled over 73 e-commerce brands beyond $150,000 per month in revenue exclusively using Google Ads over the past 7 years, I can confidently say that I have developed some proven tactics to make it happen every single time. And in this video, I want to give you the 5 proven ways which you can implement right now to scale your e-commerce brand beyond $150,000 per month in revenue profitably. Now, the way that I have categorized these 5 different proven ways is basically from the easiest to the most difficult, starting off with the first one, which is excluding bad placements, one of the most easiest and proven ways to scale your brand beyond $150,000 per month in revenue. Now, this is an e-commerce brand which is actually under my agency, Your Marketing, and that's exactly what we did here. The first thing we did once we started working with them, which was around this time right here, beginning of February of 2025, I essentially noticed that there were a lot of placements which these PMAX campaigns, the main ones that they had running, were ranking on. So the first and most important thing I did is I went inside to exclude all of the bad placements which were causing this brand to lose a lot of their money. And the main reason why I even do this, not only for this brand, but any brand I work with, is because we want to make things as efficient as possible, especially with the places that these campaigns end up ranking. Otherwise, you will notice your campaigns end up ranking for a lot of unnecessary blog pages or mobile apps or mobile games, so on and so forth, those that are not really optimized for conversion. So essentially, doing that one trick alone took this brand from basically losing money, doing about $1,000 to $1,600 per day in revenue, going all the way up now to $4,000 to $5,000 in revenue per day without making a single change on these campaigns. In fact, if we look at the last 14 days alone and compare it to the previous 14 days, we can see there's a night and day difference between these results. I mean, 147% more spent, 178 more conversions for 192 more conversion value, of course with an increased ROAS. So all these things are a byproduct of excluding any types of bad placements. And the only thing I did when it says placements is I went to the content suitability section and I strategized around these excluded placement segments right here. So essentially any types of apps, any types of app categories which just don't make sense, which are bound to lose this brand money, I went in and then simply got rid of them, because doing this alone made it so the campaigns now only go after mostly Google owned and operated placements versus going after all of these things like travel apps, utilities apps, or weather related apps, because that's ultimately going to be a big waste of money. Nobody's going to stop playing a video game or checking the weather just to purchase your product. But first, most easiest thing you can do for your brand, which is just to exclude the placements, and this thing alone can change the entire trajectory of your brand. But this brings me to the second thing, which is a little bit more difficult, but is essentially scaling based on volume approach. Now, what I mean by that is most e-commerce brands, what they do in terms of scaling is they try to find their best sellers. They may look at how much sales an individual product got or an individual SKU or variation got, and then from there, they're going to start pushing a lot more budgets just to those individual products. But that's kind of working a little bit backwards, because what that does is essentially it puts all of your efforts only on those products with the highest amount of conversions, whereas it completely ignores the other products which are basically sitting there within your product catalog and hidden, which essentially are not getting monitored or nothing's happening with them essentially. So if we look right here, for example, and there's a little bit of an issue going on here with the catalog at this point of time, but what I mean by that is we want to take a look at the volume of the total ROAS amount. We want to see those products which barely have any sales but have the highest levels of return on ad spend, because these are the products which you can actually start scaling with, along with those products which already have the most amounts of conversions. Because if you just focus on the products which have the most amount of conversions or they're spending the most amount of money, what's going to happen is Google always goes by the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the budget that you want to spend on the campaign will go towards the top 20% of your products. And this means your majority of your products will just be left sitting there barely spending any money, which really is not ideal. So to kind of bypass that, what we like to do is just kind of have a separate approach for those products with, number one, the most amount of sales, but also number two, those that don't have the most amount of sales but have the highest amount of ROAS. And oftentimes, more than not, you'll find some winning 6-figure, 7-figure products in here which you would have just kind of overlooked otherwise. And this is one of the easiest ways to just go after and give these kinds of products their own campaign strategies, their own campaign approaches to let them scale up on their own. This is something we see work for a lot of the brands to handle under my agency, Your Marketing, which, by the way, if you run a brand doing 50,000 or more per month in revenue, you need some extra help scaling to the next level with Google Ads, go on my website at yourmarketing.com and schedule a completely free call with me, and let's see how we can potentially work together and make that happen. But the third kind of little bit more difficult way to scale your brand beyond 150K per month and more in revenue is to do insights-based search campaigns. Now, most brands, what they know is they know search campaigns where you go and do some keyword research. Maybe you do a little bit of competitor analysis out in the market to understand which keywords your brand should be ranking for. But what they don't realize is that this is a very broad approach for keywords and for search campaigns. And this goes after a lot of the data, which is just out in the open. This data is something that your competitors also have access to. So right off the bat, you're basically making your search campaign strategy in a way where 10 other people could be doing the same exact thing. And this is exactly why your search campaigns don't do as well. So from my experience, what I have seen is that I have found the most amounts of success when I have used the insights section of my own e-commerce brand or my own ads account to create these search campaigns, to strategize around them. And the best way to be doing something like this is to be looking at the last 28 days worth of data, and then from here further diving deep into your search keywords right under this section to understand which keywords are ideal and which keywords are not ideal. In fact, if you like details, it will even open up the entire list to show you some valuable metrics which I base my search campaigns off of. Now, the three most important metrics I always look at is, first of all, the highest CTRs. I like to have basically the keywords with the highest amounts of CTRs within my search campaigns, because if something has a very low level of CTRs, then probably it's not going to be the best kind of situation for me. I'm going to have to work extra hard to convert those users to even click on the ad. So that directly tells me that that's not the ideal approach. Next is which keywords have the most amount of conversions. Now, again, this keyword section is beautiful because it tells you all of this information. You get to see it firsthand, what's working versus what's not. And from here, you can understand that, hey, maybe this keyword is the one that's most searched and has the most types of conversions, which is exactly what you want. And finally, what we are trying to understand from this section is essentially which one has the highest conversion rates. Again, same thing as CTRs, but usually the keywords with the higher CTRs will have higher conversion rates too. Now, that's very important because these conversion rates ultimately tell us who's purchasing from which keyword and who isn't. Because some keywords, even though they have high CTRs, might end up with extremely low conversion rates, and ultimately conversion rate should be the deciding factor. Now, there's other things you could be looking at as well, such as impressions, and then you could further go into the keyword planner tool, use these keywords to do further analysis to see how much search volume they have, and then base it off of that. But highest CTRs, most conversions, and the highest conversion rates, those are the three main metrics I always like to look at in terms of my own data to then create these search campaigns. And again, from my own personal experience, these search campaigns are the ones that end up doing the best. Now, this brings me to the fourth proven way to scale beyond 150K per month, and that is to launch competitor search campaigns. Now, I have the perfect example of this, again, under a brand that's working with me under my agency, Your Marketing. This competitor search campaign right here is the one that is generating a decent level of scale at this point of time. Now, in the last 30 days, this brand is a very high scale brand. It spends about 300 to 500,000 a month, makes like about 1.2 to 1.5 million dollars a month, Australian dollars in revenue. But essentially, out of that 1.2 million, 30,000 came from a competitor search campaign, which is almost a 3x ROAS. Now, keep in mind, this competitor search campaign is doing better than a lot of these other campaigns, like this PMAX campaign right here, or maybe like this YouTube campaign right here. So that tells you just how powerful a competitor search campaign can be if you set it up and strategize around it the right way. Now, a competitor search campaign works because this is essentially redirecting a user from going to your competitor's websites back to your website. And before you say that this is completely illegal, this is not illegal at all. And it's something that most competitors do to your brand. So this is kind of the best way to bypass that, to kind of get back the impression share which you deserve as well. Because at the end of the day, the audience member is going to purchase with the best possible brand. And to make sure that this is legal, to make sure that also this is morally right, you want to do these three things properly. First, you don't want to do trash talking on the competitors within your search ad copies, because that's the easiest way to make your brand devalue its own image and make it seem like a little childish brand, which is something you never want to do. You would rather not even mention your competitors at all within your ad copies. In fact, you should just be talking about your own advantages and why a customer should shop with your brand, which is essentially what we are doing here. I mean, the CTR is 5% and above, and all we're talking about here is how this product is a simple solution to most of the problems that the users face within this niche, how this is going to improve their health, their life, etc. So talking about improvements, talking about how beneficial this can be overall is really the only thing you have to do. Second, this competitor search campaign to actually work, you need to ensure you have the right ad strategy. Now, in this situation, we do have target ROAS based around 250% because that's what kind of worked for this brand previously with other campaigns, and we just use that as a benchmark for this campaign. But inside, if you notice, it's majority phrase match and exact match keywords. Now, these are different match types that you can have within a search campaign, and it's always best to have between phrase match and exact match only, because the moment you go a bit too broad with the campaign like this is the moment you end up wasting too much of your budgets on unnecessary keywords and ranking for something which you will technically end up wasting your money on. So to keep it a little bit narrow, but also have the algorithm be open to going after new keywords, you want to ensure that there's phrase match along with exact match going on for this campaign, and that's essentially when it's going to work the best. But along with that, again, having smart bidding is the way to go, because anything else and you would just be guessing random bids, which is something you never want to do for a campaign like this. But finally, the fifth most important thing you can do, which is a little bit more advanced, is essentially to duplicate your product feed and A/B test with something completely different. Now, I'm going to open up a brand right here, which is something we did exactly that for. Essentially, what we did is within the Google Merchant Center, we duplicated the entire product feed, and for one product feed, essentially it was all plain white background images, which is this first campaign right here, which you see. The second one, it's all lifestyle based product images, so somebody wearing the product, somebody using it, etc., to showcase it in real life. And this allowed us to kind of understand which approach the users and the audience wants the most. And as you see right here, in the last 14 days, both have spent about $2,000 each, but clearly there's one winning approach, which is the lifestyle images approach. CTR is a little bit lower, which is very interesting. However, CPCs are cut in half for the same audience, and this tells you how important it is to have basically lower CPCs, because even with the lower CTR, we're still able to get almost double the amounts of people on our website and have a higher ROAS as a result. Now, the ROAS is not double, of course, but it's still much higher than the first campaign. And the other things we see here, we see more sales here as well as more revenue. The conversion rate is kind of the same as the other campaign, so there's nothing too crazy. A little bit lower average order value, which was interesting, but everything else is essentially much more profitable to run it with this second approach. Now, just because a lifestyle approach worked here doesn't mean that's the same thing that will work for your brand, but that's why you need to go in and duplicate the product feed essentially to A/B test this right within your Google Ads account. And it's entirely possible to do this directly via the Google Merchant Center. You could also be testing different titles out for each. You could be testing Google Merchant Center promos out. There's so much you can do by just duplicating the product feed and then going after each product feed individually. But do this on a level of scale, and you'll not only be able to consistently A/B test different things out throughout the time you let both of these product feeds run, but also you'll be able to scale much more aggressively to the 150K and per month and more beyond levels by just keep focusing on what's working and then just A/B testing that against something else over time. This is going to give you much different ways to go about it, much better ways as well to scale your brand to the very next level profitably. But again, if you run a brand doing 50,000 or more per month in revenue, you need some extra help scaling to the next level, go on to my website at yourmarketing.com and schedule a completely free call with me, and let's see how we can potentially work together and make that happen.